Dearest Texas history scholars, today we will be making a study guide for Unit 10, Texas during the Great Depression and World War II. These events cover 1929 to 1950. Now, I'm at my house, so you might hear some weird sounds. I did borrow some of Molly's markers. Thanks, kid. I'm going to circle the unit title. And then I'm just going to jump right in. Okay. So our first major thing on Unit 10, this is the first thing that happens, is the Great Depression. The Great Depression lasts from 1929 to 1933. That's a major event. So I'm going to circle it. This was started on Black Tuesday. Started on Black Tuesday when the stock market crashed. And then there was a president, there was an election during the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover left office and Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt created the New Deal. He passed New Deal legislation in order to put people back to work and provide jobs. Provide jobs and relief because there was widespread homelessness, hunger, unemployment, stuff like that. One of the programs that he created under the New Deal is the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, and they worked out at the Abilene State Park. They worked several places. They worked in almost all 50 states with parks, and they built roads and all kinds of stuff like that. But the Abilene State Park is the closest one to us that they worked on. So that's it for the Great Depression. Our next topic is number 2 is the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl lasts from 1930 to 1940. Oh, I should have circled that in this color because that's a major event. Okay, couple things that I need to tell you about this is that it was caused by 3 things. Number 1, an abnormally severe drought. That's when it doesn't rain for a long period of time. And then number 2, over farming. During World War I, they planted a lot of wheat in order to feed troops, and it ended up tearing up the soil. Number 3 is high winds. So the 3 of those things combined is what created the Dust Bowl. This especially impacts the panhandle of Texas. Now, I'm going to draw a little Texas on my review, and you don't have to do the same, but you sure are welcome to. The Panhandle is this right here. That's what was impacted by the Dust Bowl the most. And so that is in the Great Plains. The Great Plains region of Texas. As a response, there were two things that happened as a response to the Dust Bowl in the Panhandle. The first response is that people moved to California. Oh, you can't see that, sorry. They moved to California. And then the second one is that the people that stay behind work really hard to plant trees and vegetation in order to hold down the topsoil to prevent this kind of disaster happening again. What else? Okay, the third thing that we need to talk about is going to take up the entire bottom half of the page, and that is World War II. Oh, that's number 3. I should have said that. Number 3 is our third major point, and that happens from 1939 to 1945. And I want to use this marker right here. I drew that so close to the unit title because I need as much room as possible in order to write about World War II. There's just a lot of information relating to that. Okay, so one thing that we know is that Hitler becomes the dictator of Germany. Molly, go in your room. Not right now. Okay, Hitler becomes the dictator of Germany. That is what leads to World War II. And when he does that, he starts the Holocaust. During the Holocaust, there are millions of civilians killed. So Holocaust kills a civilian is someone that's not associated with the military. So there's really no reason to kill civilians of a country because they're not trying to fight. So he's killing civilians that are not trying to fight him. Let's break the war down before we see where the United States enters. There are two sides in this war. And one side is the Axis powers, which Germany was the leader of. And then there's also the Allied powers, or allies. Germany is at the top of the list for Axis powers. Then we have Italy and Japan. That's the Axis powers. Now we're looking at Allied powers. There were many countries on the Allied power side, but here's some big, powerful ones. The United States, France, and England. Did you know that that England is also called the UK? That's the same place. The UK has several states within it. A lot of people don't know that, but England is one of the states of the United Kingdom. It's also sometimes called Great Britain. So there's the sides of the war. Allied Allied powers versus Axis powers. The Axis powers. The United States enters the war in 1941. So the United States was looking back at World War I, and they did not want to re-enter a large conflict like that. So they did everything they could to stay out of it until Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, which is a military base in Hawaii. That was the one where Dory or Doris Miller was a cook on a boat. He's from Texas. He's from the Waco area. And he went onto the deck and started shooting at the Japanese planes. And we read an article about that. Okay, so that's when the United States enters. There's a question about the United States entering the war and when they entered, so it's 1941. Okay, here's another thing before we talk specifically about Texas. Women in World War II is that women's role changes. Women's roles change. And then because they are entering the workforce, just like in World War I, entering workforce, they get factory jobs. So Rosie the Riveter that's hanging on my wall is an example of propaganda that is encouraging women to get factory jobs. It's not a real person. It's just a fictitious advertisement for women to enter the workforce, saying that women are valuable to the workforce, and I agree. I do believe women are valuable to the workforce and in several other situations. Okay, also on the home front, or in the United States, we have rationing. Rationing means that we are limiting food and supplies during wartime. So that happens in both World War I and World War II, during wartime. Okay, so that is a question on your test. It's like, which one of these terms means limiting food supplies during wartime? And the correct answer is rationing. Okay, now if we were to look just at Texas, Texas's role in World War II is what we're talking about. There was no fighting that happened in Texas. We know that because the fighting was in Europe. But it did affect Texas because we have new military bases. New military bases in Texas during this time. And the reason for that is because there are large expanses of land in Texas. It's all over the place. Hey, wait a second. We talked about that in Unit 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, where people are moving to Texas because of cheap available land. Hey, this might be an overarching theme of Texas history, is that there's a lot of land available, so it attracts all sorts of people to Texas, including, in this case, military bases. Okay, that's a theme. Another person from Texas that played a central role in the war is Chester W. Nimitz. He's not from Fort Worth, like I said in the notes. He's from Fredericksburg. And in Fredericksburg, there's a Nimitz Museum where it looks at his role as the, commander of the Pacific Fleet. So that's the Pacific Ocean that's like off the coast of California, and it is also the ocean that surrounds Hawaii. So there was a lot of fighting there, but it was all maritime fighting, which means like Navy, boats, submarines, those kinds of things. Okay, there are two things that I need to tell you that don't fit into this 1, 2, 3 kind of stuff. And I'm just going to write them right down here. These are kind of random pieces of information that we need to know for the whole chapter. There is, gosh, I don't know how to start this. Okay, increased demand for oil in Texas, and that is brought about by World War I and World War II. We had more machines, we needed more fuel to run those machines. So since this is not in 1, 2, or 3, I'm just gonna like put a little thought bubble around this because you need to be thinking about that in addition to these 3. Another one is that we see a theme of unequal opportunities and social inequalities during this time period, 1929 to 1950, and it leads to a major civil rights decade where people are pushing for rights for minorities. They're just pushing for greater equality in society. So I'm going to write this right here. Unequal opportunities and social inequalities. That means that not everyone is treated the same. Not everyone can accomplish the same things during this time. People were brought together by the war, and so it created this like sharing of information, that it's not just small pockets of people that aren't being treated well. It's like entire large portions of the American population, and it needed to be changed, and that's why the 1960s were the way that they were. So these two keep in mind. We talked about Texas during the Great Depression and World War II, 1929 to 1950. First thing is Great Depression. Second thing is Dust Bowl. Third thing is World War II. And then plus these 2 ideas down here. Good luck on your test. I hope that it goes very well. Have a wonderful day.